You're listening to the Casting for Fun podcast, the show that talks about entertainment, sports, music, and inspirational stories for all to enjoy. We're glad that you could join us today. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, here is your host, Albert Pineda.
Welcome, everybody, to the Casting for Fun podcast. I am your host, Albert Pineda. And before I jump into this week's episode, I wanted to take a moment to thank all my listeners for supporting the podcast, listening to it. I hope it's been enjoyable and fun for you guys to do so. It's been definitely for me. Excuse me. And this episode is going to be released on Tuesday, October the 25th. The following episode I do won't be released until Tuesday, November the 1st. So this is the last episode I'm going to be doing before this Halloween. So I wanted to just take a moment to wish everybody happy and safe Halloween. I hope you guys have a lot of fun. If you follow me on the various social media accounts that I have, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, definitely post your pictures. I want to see the costumes. It's really fun, especially to see the young kids get excited and happy about Halloween, because I know my kids do. So yeah, it's going to be a really great weekend. I hope everyone has a lot of fun celebrating this weekend. Really quick before we jump into this week's episode, I also just wanted to acknowledge that the LA Galaxy unfortunately did not come through. They were eliminated from the playoffs, like I feared they might have been, even though I was kind of riding high with confidence that they maybe could beat LAFC, but that turned out to not be the case. But the team played with a lot of heart. They left it all on the field. They made it a really great competitive game to watch, and they gave it their all. So it's going to be really fun to see the Galaxy play next season. And I'm looking forward to that quite a bit. I can't wait for Major League Soccer to start again. Of course, I mean, we still have the playoffs going on now. And that being said, I'm already rooting for the Philadelphia Phillies to win the World Series for baseball. So I might as well stick with Philly for soccer as well. I'd love to see their team, the Union, win MLS Cup because I can't stand LAFC. Oh, you know what? I mean, I have friends of the podcast, good friends of mine who love LAFC. So I believe Eddie Ramirez and Sean Lovano, both of which have been frequent collaborators to the show, especially Eddie, loves LAFC. So good for them if they win, but I hope that they don't. So sorry, Eddie. Sorry, Sean. And yeah. So one last thing I wanted to bring up really quick as well. The first trailer for Ant-Man and the Wasp and Quantumania was just released today. I'm recording this short intro on Monday, October the 24th. So really excited for that movie. That should be really, really great and fun. Okay, so this week I'm going to be talking to my dear friends, Kimmy and Nathan Cross, about Lord of the Rings of Power on Amazon Prime. So I'll be back in just a little bit to introduce that segment. Welcome back, everybody, to the show. So as mentioned earlier, this week's episode is going to be covering The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime extensively. Spoilers, massive spoilers on the first season that just finished airing on Amazon Prime. So this is going to be a unique and fun conversation with the Crosses. I know Kimmy and Nathan are big fans of the Lord of the Rings franchise. And we have an extensive conversation about the show, the things we like, things that we didn't like so much. Overall, we do recommend the show highly. We thought it was really great. But I understand that there have been mixed feelings from the fan base in regards to the show itself. So we go over that. And personally, I wanted to make my opinion clear that I love podcasting. I love being able to be a content creator and share my thoughts and have friends and family who know me want to listen to it for entertainment purposes. And I am excited over the concept that everyone else can do that too. So you can get so many YouTube videos, podcasts, whatever it is, talking about the things that they love and then, criticizing and critiquing things that they think could be better. So I think that's a really important thing to do, and to not automatically assume that it's, racist or sexist to say, oh, I don't like this because of that. So, for instance, a lot of the heat that The Last Jedi got, I think there were legitimate concerns and complaints about that movie. And there could be legitimate concerns and complaints about the Rings of Power. So all the power to all those who didn't like it and still created content to talk about it. Personally, I did enjoy it, even though I do acknowledge there are faults with the show. So again, it's up to you. Be your own judge as to whether or not you want to engage with something. Personally, I do recommend the Rings of Power, but I understand for the point of view of people who do not. Well, anyways, that's enough of me talking. I want to get into this conversation with the Crosses because I think we have some interesting things to share, and I think it'll be fun and entertaining as well. Okay, so here we go. This is my conversation with Kimmy and Nathan Cross about Amazon Prime's The Rings of Power. Returning to the Casting for Fun podcast are my very dear friends, Kimmy and Nathan Cross. Kimmy, Nathan, how are you both?
Doing great.
Doing great.
Good to have you both back on the show to talk about stuff that we love. And yes, I mean, I guess I just automatically assumed that you guys like the Lord of the Rings. As Kimmy, you had mentioned that you there was some type of reference to Frodo and Sam in one of our Stranger Things episodes.
Yeah, you assumed correctly. We are pretty big Lord of the Rings fans.
Okay, very cool.
A lot of it for me just comes from my brother. He got me into the movies, and now we try to watch the extended editions once a year now.
Oh, awesome. Very
cool.
Love
it that much.
Very good, very good. So actually, to start out, I wanted to talk about that. So again, for those tuning in or listening, not really tuning in because it's not live, but for those who are listening to the podcast, we're going to be talking about Amazon Prime's The Lord of the Rings of Power extensively. And there's been lots of opinions about the show, some really positive, some very negative, but we're definitely going to be talking about this and having fun doing so. To begin, though, I wanted to actually ask you about that. So how did you guys get first introduced to the world of Tolkien, and were you first introduced to the books, the movies, the cartoons, or how did you come to know and love the Lord of the Rings?
I'll go first. For me, it was the movies. I wasn't very interested in them. I didn't even see Fellowship or Two Towers in the theater. Two Towers was actually my first exposure to it, and I'll tell you how. My sister and her friends had the DVD copy, and they were watching it, and I wasn't very interested, but my room was down the hall from the TV room. So from the hallway, you could see the TV, right? And I was walking, I think, from the bathroom to my room, and I glanced at the TV, and then I leaned back out from my doorway to to keep watching the TV, and it's the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what is this? What's going on? Oh my gosh, that's cool. Whoa, that's cool. And if I didn't want to barge in on my sister and her friends, so I literally just sat there in the hallway and watched the rest of Two Towers from Helm's Deep onward, and just thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And the next day I asked Brienne, I said, what was the movie you're watching? And she told me, she goes, there was a first one, that's the second one. And I was like, there's a first one. And so she sat me down, we watched Fellowship of the Ring, and I remember that as soon as it ended, that closing shot of Frodo and Sam walking toward Mount Doom, and then it fades to the credits, I went, wait, that's it? That's it? She goes, there's a second one, remember? I was like, oh, okay. And since then, I've read the books and just fallen totally in love with it.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
For me, when I was younger, I knew about Lord of the Rings through family members that had read the books and had recommended them, but I had never read them. I was exposed to the cartoon, like the really old, like 80s. Yeah, anyway,
mm-hmm.
It's charming in its own way. Yeah, Golem is interesting, but so from there I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. And then when the movies were starting to come out, my brother James was super excited about it. He had read the books, and his excitement rubbed off on me. So we went and saw Fellowship like opening night, and I was hooked from that point forward. And since then, I haven't actually read the physical copies of the books. I started so many times, but I've gotten through an unabridged audio book version of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. So I feel like I can talk about And yeah,
we haven't read the Silmarillion though. Am I saying that right? Silmarillion.
Okay. Silmarillion.
So full disclosure.
Yeah, our extent of Lord of the Rings knowledge really is the Lord of the Rings, not
and
anything.
The Hobbit. We've read
the Hobbit. I have read the Hobbit. I did read that.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oh, very cool, very cool. I think my experience is very similar to yours, Nathan. I remember in elementary school, my teacher showed us the animated Hobbit movie, and I only vaguely remember it. So I don't think it left like that much of an impression on me. But when Fellowship came out, it was actually the perfect time for me because, you know, it's kind of interesting. Kimmy, you're celebrating your anniversary from returning home from missionary service. When I returned home, it was December of 2001. So it was like all the trailers were out. It was being really hyped up. So it was like the perfect time. Oh, this is definitely want to be the first movie I want to see as soon as I'm able to. And just like you, Nathan, I saw it opening night and loved it. Probably saw it at least 3 or 4 times in the theater, along with the other two, the Two Towers and Return of the King. So yeah, I absolutely loved them. And the Hobbit movies I thought were great too. Not quite as good as Lord of the Rings, but there was just something really special, I think, about everything that Peter Jackson and his team did with those movies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, completely agree with that.
Yeah. So as soon as I heard, I mean, it was many years after that, they're actually going to be developing a Lord of the Rings show on Amazon Prime. I was actually really excited. So do you guys remember when you heard the news? Because I know this has been a project long in the making for like at least like 4 or 5 years.
I don't remember when I first heard about it.
I remember first hearing about the bidding war that was going on for the rights to make a show. And when Amazon was like $1 billion, I laughed. I was like, this is either going to be the biggest hit or the biggest flop. And yeah, that's I don't know, that's the first time I really heard about it. And then yeah, I just kind of followed the news here and there since then.
I was apprehensive. I was like, oh gosh, it's another cash grab. It's a reboot. It's because we've had so many of those, cash grab reboots, and I thought that was kind of what it was going to be. But
we did a good job of not getting our hopes up.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say, in part because of your podcast and you're wanting us to talk about this show, was a good motivator, probably the prime motivator for us to sit down and watch the show. We did so starting out reluctantly, and then, well, we have things to talk about after that.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So I definitely want to jump into that now. So here we are. The show, it's come and gone, the first season. We know, as you mentioned, Nathan, Amazon paid a really hefty price to get this. And my understanding was there was supposed to be at least a grand total of 5 seasons. And I guess with the amount of investment that they put into it, I mean, they want to get a good return on their investment. So my guess is, regardless of what the fan reception has been, I guess they want to make these other seasons as well. So I mean, considering the amount of money they paid, and hopefully they are making their money back. So general thoughts, what, before we jump into specific story arcs, because I definitely want to do that, what were your general thoughts and impressions after having watched all 8 episodes of the show?
We were very pleasantly surprised. I loved it. Nathan, you loved it too, and
I did. Yeah, I think we both came into it going, okay, let's just brace ourselves. Let's just get through this first episode. Oh gosh, it's 8 episodes long. Okay, well, we can do this. All these episodes are an hour long. Oh, this one's over an hour long. Oh goodness. And then we just got hooked.
After the first episode, we were like, oh my gosh, this is actually pretty good.
The acting is really good. The production values, the visuals and things are really impressive. You can tell they put a lot of money into that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, overall, I think we were very pleasantly surprised. It was nice to see different sides of some of these characters that we've come to know and learn a little bit more about their background and history. It was really interesting, and culture.
Overall impression for me is it felt like something Peter Jackson had his hands on, even though he didn't. But that's probably the highest compliment I could pay any movie.
Absolutely.
I felt similarly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. So so when they announced that it was going to be showrunners, I have their names here in my notes. G.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, and I believe actually Patrick McKay is a member of the church, who I guess both of them just had experience mostly writing Hollywood scripts, but not actually show running something this massive. So I know there was some controversial about that pick from Amazon's part, and the fact that I guess Peter Jackson had been approached, according to a report I read in Variety, where he initially turned them down, the showrunners and producers at Amazon Studios, saying that I guess he wanted to see scripts and he was promised that he would be shown scripts, but then that never happened. So I know that could be a situation where, you have the fans on the internet complaining like, oh, you clearly didn't want Peter Jackson. I don't know what exactly happened, but maybe there was something lost in translation. But my understanding was, again, according to a report I read in Variety, is that they specifically intended to not include Peter Jackson and his team of Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, who won Oscars for their work with Return of the King.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe that could have been a red flag. But that being said, I like you guys. I'm impressed with the show we got. I thought it was really good. But that being said, I will play devil's advocate and acknowledge that there are some flaws with the show.
Oh,
I guess kind of
yeah, there are.
I mean, just kind of just off the top, what I would probably suggest is I remember Kimmy, you had mentioned before with our conversation about Stranger Things that you have to kind of like care about the characters, at least one or two, and the more even better. I felt it was kind of hard to really get drawn into the characters. I guess with the TV show format, we're going through storylines a little bit quicker. Whereas in Fellowship, I mean, you meet Gandalf and the hobbits, and you don't meet other characters until gradually. Eventually, you get to meet Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli, the rest of the Fellowship. So I really liked how Fellowship was done, its pacing in introducing us to the characters, and they had easier names to remember. So I think that also made it.
That helped.
So definitely, I would definitely give Fellowship the nod as far as like the character development and liking the characters. Not to say that Rings of Power had bad characters, but I guess I can kind of understand where some of the complaints might have come from.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. If I had to say, which cast of characters I loved more, absolutely Fellowship. I love those characters. I like these characters.
Yeah.
But I love the Fellowship characters. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think there are a few characters from Rings of Power that we could probably say that we might just love those characters,
Sure. Yeah.
but it's nowhere near the entire cast.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then one other thing that I would mention, music, I think plays a really big part in drawing you into any type of project. So Howard Shore's musical score for the three movies was fantastic. I guess he only did the theme song. So the rest of the music for the show was done by another gentleman. If I might not have in my notes here, Bear McCreary. I guess I'm sort of familiar with some of his stuff. So the music was good, but I mean, again, I think I would put Howard Shore's musical score on par with what John Williams did in Star Wars, to be honest.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
totally agree with that.
It's iconic.
Yeah, but yeah, visually it was fantastic. I think the overall story we got was good, and the fight sequences. I mean, there weren't as many as in Lord of the Rings or the other movies, but the fight sequences we did get, I thought, were fantastic as well. So to be honest, that's what I would say. Yes, that you can. There's parts of the show that I didn't necessarily like, but overall, I thought the show was really good and really worth the time for people.
Absolutely.
Cool. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the character arcs, where this is where it might get a little bit of a little bit controversial. So starting first with Galadriel. So did you guys like the portrayal of Galadriel in Rings of Power?
I think it was really interesting as a general note to see elves emoting. And again, it was emoting on a very lower level because they have very restrained personas. But it was very interesting. And at first, I want to say it was just a little bit off-putting, or it was a little odd. It took a little bit of getting used to. But then by the end, I kind of appreciated it. It humanizes the elves a little bit more, which again, I know just by saying it humanizes the elves is kind of like contradictory to what the elves really are. But I don't know. I found it was interesting. I wasn't I don't know, won over entirely.
I liked her portrayal. I thought she was pretty I don't know if cursing is allowed on your podcast, but
I can edit it.
pretty bad. Anyway,
I agreed.
and I thought she was very interesting. I loved how driven she was to a fault, at some points. And I was just saying to Nathan, like, we really got a completely different Galadriel than the one we got in the original trilogy. In the original trilogy, she was kind of she was a fixture, but if you took the Rings of Power Galadriel, popped her into the original trilogy, she would have joined the Fellowship. She would have been like, okay, I'll take the reins. Move aside, Aragorn. I'm going to take over and lead this Fellowship, and let's go get Sauron. So that was very interesting that we're seeing a completely different Galadriel. But for me, that's believable because it's literally centuries between Rings of Power and the events of the original trilogy, and people change. People mature and they grow and they learn, and so I will totally accept the fact that Galadriel probably did used to be like this from the Rings of Power.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, totally agree. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Nathan.
I was just going to say that overall, I liked her character. It's just, again, I think it's just a little different. Like it's going to take people some getting used to.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on. I mean, it's kind of simple, or I mean, kind of silly. I think to have to dwell on this, but I know a lot of the things I've read online is they hated the aspect of Galadriel being able to slay a troll by herself, essentially. And again, I mean, it seems kind of weird and crazy. Because they make the argument that in Fellowship of the Ring, it took the entire Fellowship to take out one cave troll. But at the same time, I mean, like I think it's being kind of nitpicky because you had a mountain of orcs that they were also fighting at the same time. And I mean, I think it's oftentimes there could be, drawing out a battle for the sake of having the excitement. And we get to see the scene where Frodo gets stabbed and we think he's dead, but he had the mithril shirt. So as far as Galadriel being able to take out a troll very easily, I think it was done not so much to make her look like a Mary Sue character, but just to show just how battle driven she is, where the other elves are not, because they don't want to accept or believe the fact that Sauron's still around. So I think, I mean, again, I respect other people's opinions. I think it's great that people can make YouTube videos and talk about things like that. But at the same time, I think sometimes we can be a little nitpicky about things.
Yeah, I think that's a little picky.
I would not describe her as a Mary Sue. The most Mary Sue moment that happens, there's one, and it's when the pyroclastic flow is blowing through, and she's just standing there taking an entire face full of it, and then very beginning of the next episode, she stands up and just dusts herself off. Like, no, everyone's on fire, everyone's ashes.
No, everyone would be melted. Anyway, we can talk about that later.
Yeah,
but
we'll get to that part for sure.
Yeah, as far as her taking down the cave troll, though, if you remember in Fellowship, Legolas was the one that took it down in the end.
Yeah,
the elf, right?
Yeah.
And in that moment, I remember when we were watching it, I just said to Nathan, like, man, all those other elves are so incompetent. Look, she just stepped in and took it down like that. And it makes sense. Like you said, Albert, none of them were motivated. They didn't want to even be there.
Yeah.
So of course she's the one with the motivation to just,
Yeah, they were even, I mean, elves don't get tired, but they were even expressing that they were tired at that point. And she is just like, let's go. It makes sense to me. I think people should calm down about that.
Okay, so I had a question.
Let her be awesome. Let her be awesome. It's cool.
Okay, so as you guys mentioned, I mean, you're not necessarily Tolkien scribes, but I mean, you love the movies, and that's where most of your information comes from. So, I mean, and had you read the books at all, or no?
Yeah, we've both read the first 3 books.
Okay. I think you had mentioned that earlier. Okay. So it's interesting to me that a lot of the complaints people are saying is that it's not in line with what the books are saying, or the story that Tolkien's kind of written now. And the controversial statement I think I would make is, I don't know if Tolkien was really like the best at storytelling, to be honest. There's a few things that I think, some things that I consider to be kind of mistakes. Like, so we talk about Galadriel. Galadriel shouldn't be able to take out a troll by herself. But in the book version of Return of the King, Pippin takes out a troll by himself at the Black Gate, which is like, again, that was omitted from the movie version. But there's a lot of inconsistencies like that, such as, I guess, Faramir, so Boromir's brother, wasn't affected at all by the ring. So he just kind of like neglected it. He said, oh, I don't care. I'm not going to try and steal that from you. It has no influence over me, which doesn't really make any sense. But again, I'm more in tune with what the movies have taught us, that the ring is all powerful and that it can corrupt anyone from Gandalf and Galadriel all the way down to Frodo. So, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we could spend a lot of time just talking about that. I don't want to spend too much time on that particular subject, but I think there's been some discrepancies or maybe aspects of Tolkien's work that I don't think are, I don't think we have to like follow to the letter of the law, because it may not actually be that good to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
it takes Frodo like what 50 years just to get out of the Shire, and
literally,
it's very his he was incredible at world building. That was his strong point. But when it comes to storytelling, Tolkien
he did a great job.
It drags a bit.
He did a great job with the overall character arcs.
Yeah.
But the pacing for the books, especially the Two Towers, that's a prime example. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
You Two Towers, you get like, here's this person's story, and then you switch, here's this person's story, and it's kind of jarring the way it's written. Again, these were books. They were never meant to be turned into movies or TV shows. Like that was something he probably never even imagined would happen. So the fact that we're here with more Lord of the Rings content out in the world that's actually good,
Yeah, and
I
that
think we should just be happy.
and you have to consider, yes, and you have to consider too that those are two completely different mediums. To take a book and translate it exactly as it is into a movie is impossible because they're two different mediums. You just can't. There's always gonna be little changes and differences. You just have to be okay with it.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
overall, I mean, yeah, I was gonna say overall, I think we all agree. Like Peter Jackson, Philippa Boyens, I'm forgetting everyone. Fran Walsh, they did an insanely amazing job adapting that to film, and I think they did a. I don't know, I mean, I'm not again familiar with the Silmarillion, but I'm invested in what the show has done so far and what they're going to do next.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I
So
think
for
that
those who
says
are
a lot.
listening, I mean, please don't take it as me wanting to just bash Tolkien because I mean, obviously, I'm a fan of his work. I just think there's been improvements to the adaptation, as Kimmy had mentioned. So for those who don't like the Rings of Power, I can see where you're coming from. Yeah, I definitely do. But at the same time, I would just tell people that the books aren't necessarily always better. So I guess maybe that's the simplest way of putting it.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so going back to, unless there's anything more you want to talk about Tolkien adaptations, or
I just think, I mean, I don't know a lot of these characters from the Silmarillion or anything like that, but the ones we are somewhat familiar with or we know lead to other things. I think they've done a good job honoring those characters.
oh, absolutely, yeah. So with that, we get a little bit more backstory with Elrod and his relationship with Durin, which I guess was sort of hinted at before. I don't recall, maybe, but their arc was actually pretty cool and entertaining. So what did you guys think of Elrod and Durin and the discovery of Mithril? Which I think maybe that's a departure, if I'm not mistaken, from how it was found in the books.
I can't remember how it was found in the books, but Elrond and Durin was our favorite part
For sure.
of the whole show.
They're probably our top favorite characters in the
very
entire
cool.
show. Yeah.
And Durin's wife, she's awesome.
Oh, her name was Disa, Disa, Disa.
I think it's Disa.
Remember. But yeah, loved her and loved that relationship, and just wanted to hug them and squeeze them both.
Very cool, very cool.
That's the first shot of Elrond. I was like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm running over you. The first shot of Elrond, I was like, I don't know. But then they developed this relationship, and now I'm just like, I love them all.
Very cool. That's another aspect that I kind of wanted to just address briefly, that I understand there was some controversy with some of the casting decisions. Personally, I don't have any problems at all with having a Hispanic elf or a black dwarf or a black hobbit, or I guess technically a Harfoot. I guess they're not called hobbits just yet, but I mean, so again, I can understand if people don't necessarily like the character itself, that's totally fine, totally great. But to kind of base it entirely on race, I don't know. It's just I wish people would not do it that way, to be honest.
I didn't realize that there were people that actually were hating on the fact that there was diversity in Middle Earth now. I think it's great.
Maybe I just stay off the internet a little too much.
It was one of the first.
I didn't even notice. I mean, at first,
yeah,
because we're just used to seeing more representation in media now.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was until you pointed out, like, oh, it's cool to see black hobbits, and I was like,
it's
oh
awesome.
Yeah, you're right.
It's honestly awesome, and I think it's because Lord of the Rings, it's for everyone. It's not just for the white audience that the books might have originally been written for. It's for everyone, and it's awesome to see them embracing that. And it felt so natural in the show. It didn't stand out. It wasn't like waved like a flag in front of your face. It was just done so naturally that, again, like Kimmy said, you don't even really notice it until you stop to think about it.
Yeah. Okay. So continuing on with the Hobbits, then, or I guess technically the Harfoots. So the Wanderer Stranger story arc. I thought that was pretty fascinating too. In fact, actually, Allison called it right at the very beginning. Oh, I think that's Gandalf. As soon as we saw him, like, what are you thinking? Are you crazy? Oh, yeah. But sure enough, she was correct. So, I totally forgot to mention this is a massive spoiler podcast. So for those, we're already well into the podcast, but I'm assuming, most people probably know that about listening to us talk.
Yeah.
So what did you think of that story arc, and particularly focusing on the Harfoot? So Nori and Poppy. I mean, again, they were great, but I mean, they're no Frodo and Sam. Again, like
Yeah.
you can't touch just what Tolkien did with those characters initially. But I did think that their story was kind of interesting, and particularly the story of the wanderer slash stranger.
Yeah, I really liked that whole story arc. Like you said, they're no Frodo and Sam, but I did like that there were girls. That was nice. There were more girls all, in general in this whole show versus the original trilogy,
Mhm.
where there were like three. But yeah, the whole story arc was fun. I called it as soon as he landed. I was like, oh, that's probably gonna be Gandalf, and then
Mhm.
um, we both agreed that it was kind of slow and stretched out a bit. The whole reveal of who he really was, I feel like shouldn't have waited until the finale because I mean, we all knew by then, right? And then they tried to do this, oh, he's actually Sauron, and I was like, no, he's not. This is Gandalf. and, and then sure enough, oh yeah, he's not Sauron. He's
Mhm.
Gandalf, and it's like, yeah, we knew that. Show, we knew that. So it was a little it was cool, but I wish that they had treated us more treated the viewers as though we were more intelligent than they did.
Mhm.
Yeah. I feel like we could have got a little bit more variety in that storyline than we did.
Mhm.
But overall, I enjoyed it. I thought the Harfoots were actually really interesting. Their nomadic lifestyle, their camouflage was cool.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, I I found all of that to be very, very fascinating and interesting, and to learn that, we've always seen the hobbits as like just generally good folk, but these Harfoots are also flawed in some pretty significant ways that also I thought was very interesting. And I don't know, I overall enjoyed that story arc quite a bit.
Yeah.
Very cool,
Getting
very cool. Yeah, I like that we got
getting
to.
to see Gandalf melt some witches was pretty cool too.
Yeah. The witches refer to him as a starry, as starry, I think. And I think that
Starry.
is taken from lore that Astari were like, I guess, like angels had been sent to Middle Earth to take on the form of an elderly man, to
Oh,
guide and protect and help the citizen, the people of Middle Earth. So as you know,
okay.
as in the lore, I think it was the extended version of the Two Towers where Gandalf has the line, "I am Saruman," or as Saruman should have been. So I guess all
Right.
the wizards are there to essentially be good and to do good for Middle Earth, which I guess that was taken from the book itself. So that was actually a cool inclusion, I thought.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I pointed out to Kimmy too that when the stranger falls, he doesn't even quite really remember who he is. Much like Gandalf, when he comes back as Gandalf the White, was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. That's what they used to call me, Gandalf, Gandalf the Grey, I'm
Mhm.
Gandalf the White." It was interesting to kind of see that little parallel. Just again, cemented the fact this is totally Gandalf.
Yeah, and then they even had the line for Nori, "Whenever in doubt, follow your nose." The exact same line
Hmm.
that he
Yeah,
said to Mary in the Mines of Moria. So that was really cool.
That was cute. Yeah.
made us
Nice.
smile.
Yeah. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of him in the upcoming seasons. Again, I thought that
Same
was an
here.
aspect of the show I thought that was really well done.
Hmm.
So Halbrand Sauron. Okay, so Halbrand, I believe he was a brand new character created exclusively for the show. So I think there were some exceptions people took towards that. If you got a new character that people don't necessarily like very much, and I guess there have been some people who didn't like the idea that he turned out to be Sauron, even though I guess Sauron had the reputation of being a deceiver. I just don't know if he ever took the form of a human before. So if I guess if people take exception with that, so be it. But I thought it was kind of interesting. So, what did you think of the reveal of who the true identity for Sauron was?
I liked it. I thought it caught us both completely by surprise. We did not see it coming until that last episode.
Yeah, it dawned on me partway through the beginning of the last episode. I went, "Oh my gosh!" And Kimmy's like,
Tell me what.
"What?"
And yeah, I liked it a lot. It was pretty great. You're right. I don't think we know if he ever did take the form of a man, but I mean, why not?
Mhm.
Why not? It makes sense if he's the deceiver and I mean, it makes him that much more scary if you
Mhm.
ask me. And And poor Galadriel, I mean, her whole arc and it ending with knowing that the one thing that was driving her for centuries was literally right next to her
Mhm.
Mhm.
for months on end, being her friend. Oh my gosh, talk about trauma.
They
And
didn't.
go ahead.
You mentioned this. They did a great job of giving him this story arc that felt fairly familiar. Of like, oh, here's this deposed nomadic king who is the one true king of the Southlands, and it was, but he's hesitant and he's done things and he doesn't feel like he's worthy of it. And it's like, oh yeah, this is Aragorn all over again. And then when it turned out to be Sauron, it was like, oh, kind of like that. They kind of threw us with that, which was pretty great. But there were lots of clues along the way. The fact like he was wearing dark clothes and Galadriel's all in white. And he in the last episode was wearing the same necklace when Galadriel confronted him about his heritage. He was wearing the same necklace that the betrayer butcher of the Southlands, the one who uses the key, it's the same exact necklace, and he's the one who's all about Sauron coming back, and it was just like all these little clues, and I thought it was cleverly done.
I
Mhm.
agree. And I really appreciated just getting to know Sauron. As strange as that sounds, in the original trilogy, he's just a big eyeball that goes, I see you now and then, and that's it. You
Mhm.
don't get any character development at all on Sauron, which is okay because the original trilogy it's all about the Fellowship, right?
Yeah.
But you always got to have a good villain, right? So if the original trilogy did have any kind of weakness, that would probably be it. We don't really get to know the villain as a person at all. But
Mhm.
now finally we do, and I'm like, cool, thank you, show, for giving us some Sauron character development. This is fun. I liked it.
Yeah, and how he kind of bent Celebrimbor to his, into using creating the rings of power. How he, is very, very well done, very crafty.
Mhm.
I liked his character overall.
Very cool. Yeah, I totally agree with both your assessments about the Sauron story arc that we got to see. And as you mentioned, Nathan, yeah, there were clues along the way. I decided to go back and rewatch it. I'm only on episode 4 for a second rewatch, but there have been a few. Like he dropped the line of Luke's can be deceiving to Galadriel when they were on the ship
Okay.
that
Yeah.
destroyed ship thing. And it was even mentioned that men of the Southland were actually on Morgoth's side, who's obviously who Sauron was following. And then I guess the map that they said looked like, I mean, there was the map where they were trying to establish or build their land, was the Southland land, like on the map of the Middle Earth.
Uh-huh.
So it was kind of hinting, I think it was giving us even clues that the Southlands was eventually going to become Mordor.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
speaking of that, yeah, so that was actually a really cool addition they added as well, because I believe in the books they don't discuss how Mordor was actually formed. So that we actually got to see it firsthand. I thought that was actually a really cool inclusion.
It was very
That
cool.
was so cool. Like at first you're like, what is going on? Are they gonna flood it? Oh, that sucks. And then you realize, oh, they're gonna just blow it up. Oh my gosh. And then the VFX on that were pretty incredible too. Looked really real.
Yeah.
So that was really smart.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
I just want to say the stranger does just, or not the stranger, but the Halbrand does just walk right into Mordor. Just thought I mentioned that.
One can simply walk into Mordor.
yeah,
Mhm.
there you go.
Well, if you're Sauron himself, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So that'd be an example of like, yes, it didn't take what was given us to in the books, but I mean, there was very little, if anything at all, about really the formation of how Mordor came about. So there have been, I guess, inclusions that I thought have actually been really well done on the show, to be honest.
Mhm.
One last thing I wanted to mention that we get to meet Isildur as a young man. That's actually kind of cool, and I'm curious to see what his path is going to be like in the show. In fact, it's kind of funny. So Allison enjoys the shows with me. She doesn't know nearly half the names, but as soon as she heard Isildur, she immediately recognized him. She was like, "Oh, that guy's bad news." Like, yep, you're right. So we're gonna get to see his journey, which will be pretty interesting, I think.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very curious about the tragic trajectory that his story is going to take.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's interesting where we left him too. Everyone's assuming he's dead. We of course know he's not.
Mhm.
But he is in Mordor,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That's where he is.
He's
Yeah.
in Mordor,
Yeah.
And the
So
horse is going back to hopefully find him.
yeah.
We
So
assume.
just be interesting to see what happens with him next season.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So I had a few just kind of like lore questions, and when it comes to Lord of the Rings, but of course I wanted to get to your talking points. Did you have any additional things you wanted to bring up about the show?
We do have a few.
Oh, we really liked how Numenor, how closely it resembled Minas Tirith.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That was really cool. And we're a little foggy on this. Maybe you know, Albert, but Numenor does get destroyed, right?
That was actually one of the questions I had for you guys. So
So
in Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf and Elrond are having a conversation. They're saying, that Gandalf tells them we're gonna trust in men to be the new leaders of Middle Earth, and then Elrond's explaining, men are weak. The blood of Numenor is all but spent. So I mean, I'm assuming Numenor does get destroyed, but I think they have to explain that or address that. How I guess certain members of Numenor are the Dunedain, as it were, such as Aragorn. And so how that actually comes into play, the fact that you have certain humans who can live longer than regular humans. But that would be an interesting concept that I think they're going to address on the show eventually. But again, I don't know personally what happens to Numenor.
right. Well, we do know that Aragorn is related directly to Isildur.
Uh-huh.
And so I would assume, like when I saw Elendil, first of all, the light of Elendil, like that ring a bell. But I'm assuming that he is probably one of the Dunedain.
Oh,
Because
okay.
he hinted, his character, he talked about it, he hinted that he had a backstory that we don't know about that may have actually been somewhat royalty related.
Right.
He hinted at it, but we never got clear answers on that. So I'm assuming that they are Dunedain. And with the whole Minas Tirith architecture happening in Numenor, we're also anticipating that we're going to have Numenorians transplanted over to Middle Earth and to set up Gondor and Minas Tirith. Yeah.
Okay, that totally makes sense. And then also the fact that Ilindir has a close relationship, or at least respects the elves, whereas the other citizens of Numenor don't. And that would explain how eventually in Aragorn's life he gets to live in Rivendell. So things like that. Yeah, so that totally makes sense. Yeah, that Isildur would also be Dunedain, and I guess his sister as well, who was also created specifically for the show.
Yeah, that was an interesting inclusion, and it's interesting that the king was telling her like you're going to be queen one day, and we both went what? So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that comes about.
And what did she see in the Palantir?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, very cool. Did you guys have any additional stuff?
Oh, sorry. Hang on.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh, it was just really cool seeing Khazad-dûm in its heyday. And or Moria. That it made the thinking back retroactively now on the scene where the Fellowship is traveling through the mines. It makes that so much more tragic now, knowing that there were families that lived there. It wasn't just a workplace, a big mine. It was an actual city, where people worked and lived and grew. Like, oh my gosh, it was so beautiful, all the greenery in there and the water. I was like, oh my gosh, this looks like the Genesis cave from Wrath of Khan. This is amazing. It's so, yeah, I thought
it definitely gives credence to what Gimli had talked about, because I mean Gimli really talks it up like this is a beautiful place, this is like amazing, you're going to get the hospitality of the dwarves, and then I mean it gives even more of a how heartbreaking it must have been for Gimli to see it the way it was in Fellowship.
It makes his reaction that much more understandable now. He wasn't just being dramatic. He was feeling what we all can feel now. It's like, oh man, this is awful.
Which I think this highlights another big talking point for us is the fact that this show, we don't feel like it's taking away. If anything, it's adding to what we have. Because now going back, we're going to rewatch the trilogy extended editions at some point, probably before the end of the year. Going back now and watching these characters in action is going to be so much more interesting. I think we'll be paying so much more attention to the little things just to see, oh, hey, that does connect back. That's cool.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I agree. This is so cool to see Moria like that.
Yeah. And speaking of Moria, one other thought. Sorry, Albert.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
The Balrog. I was really hoping we'd get more Balrog, and we didn't. And I was like, dang it.
Yeah, they just teased us.
Yeah, it was just a teaser, but oh well, season 2, I guess.
Yeah. So very good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, and then the stranger, the wanderer, and Nori heading off to Rune? Question mark. Have no idea what that is all about.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
don't.
going to investigate where the witches came from.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty much it.
But yeah,
Yeah, that's all we have.
we'll see what happens
Oh,
in
okay.
season
So,
2.
so one additional question that I had for you guys then. So, yes, as you mentioned, Nate, they created the 3 rings for the elves, which are essentially going to be, I guess, the lifeline that they're going to need, because they wanted the mithril, but the dwarves or Doran's dad said no. It's kind of funny too. So I remember after watching the show, that's only at that point would I be willing to go and watch all the YouTube videos that people are making, whether it's positive or negative. And there were people who were kind of complaining of the fact that, well, what are you going to do with mithril? Are you going to like inject it into you or something like that? So people didn't like that idea. But to me, it almost seems that being in proximity to any magical item in Middle Earth can have an effect on you, right? The
Yeah.
fact that I mean, you wear the mithril. I mean, it's armor essentially. The sting, Bilbo's sword glows when orcs are near it. So I mean, that's an effect of being near. And of course, we saw that you didn't have to even be wearing the ring. The ring could call out to people at various times. So to me, it kind of seems like, yeah, I get your point about injection the mithril, but I mean, it just seems being in close proximity to any type of magical item can actually affect you in Middle Earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it isn't Arwen's even star necklace. Is that made from mithril? I'm assuming now. Do we know what it's made from?
I don't know if we know that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I accepted it. I was like, yeah, mithril is a nice cure-all. Okay. I accept that. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, but when going back to my original question, so with the 3 rings, so we see that the elves are going to have it, so I guess that's going to help prolong them or save them from whatever's. I guess because the tree was destroyed, was that right from the beginning? Or I kind of was a little lost as to what exactly is affecting the elves now.
Yeah, all we know is that there's the symbolism of light and darkness.
Yeah.
And they hinted at that too when they talked about like where mithril even came from, which was kind of a cool little story bit. But they basically talked about the fact that darkness is kind of infecting the land, and it's a sign that Sauron is still out there. And
Right.
and so their light is fading. They need
So
more light.
It was evil. The evil of Sauron was
Yeah, I think
draining
it's
the life from their tree.
I think it's like literally more symbolic than anything else.
Well, sure, but it's also literal. And the same thing happens to Arwen in Return of the King. Remember when Elrond says her fate is now tied to the fate of the ring and whether or not you succeed, because the evil was draining her life force away, and affecting her. And that's why all the elves were leaving
Yeah.
at the end of it too. So, yeah.
Okay, so it was kind of interesting to see that Halbrand / Sauron was actually, creating those rings for him. So it kind of goes along the lines of, yes, he was the deceiver. He created those rings to trick people. So the elves got 3, the dwarves get 7, and then the humans get 9. But I guess only the humans were actually corrupted by them, right? The 9 Nazgul. So I guess we know what happened. I mean, obviously Galadriel in the extended version of Fellowship, she shows her ring, so she has it. But I guess it didn't affect her the same way that the 9 rings affected the human kings, the Nazgul, right?
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on this. Well, first of all, I like that fact that Galadriel was saying like, okay, well, 1 ring corrupts, right? Which we know.
Yeah.
1 ruler
And
corrupts.
1 ruler corrupts. 2 divides, but 3 can stand together.
That makes sense. Okay, cool.
There's balance.
Okay.
Yeah, so Galadriel gets a ring, Elrond gets a ring, and then another elf gets a ring, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but he's actually like a seafaring elf kind of guy.
Okay.
And eventually he gives up his ring of power to Gandalf, if I remember correctly.
Oh.
I know, isn't that interesting?
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it seems I think Galadriel's the explanation of Rings of Power is going to give us is that Galadriel's plan to go against what Halbrand was suggesting, hey, make 2 rings, was no, we're going to make 3 rings. We're going to subvert his plan. I know he's up to something, but doing 3 is probably going to protect us. And I think that was the smart move. And I think that's going to lead to the creation of more Rings of Power because Halbrand's realizing, okay, well, the elves outdid me on this one. So let's make more.
And I would like to submit the idea that the dwarves actually were corrupted, and that's what drove them to dig too deep and too greedily until they hit the Balrog and it destroyed them all.
That's
That's
interesting point.
that's
Maybe
always
because
the headcanon that I'd always accepted.
yeah, and maybe
Okay.
that's because they see what the Mithril can do for them. They're like, we need more.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh, yeah, that's a
My
really
headcanon
great
now,
point.
too.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, yeah. So that's pretty much all the talking points I have. Did you guys have anything else for tonight with the Rings of Power?
No, just we were happy with it and we're excited for season 2.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad you
Yeah.
guys liked the show. So if it turned out that you guys didn't like it, I probably feel really bad since you kind of watched it on my account.
No, you're good.
we have you to thank because
Okay.
it might have taken us a long time to come around to watching it. But I'm really glad that we did.
Mhm.
And I would encourage people who are kind of sitting on the fence like about it to go watch it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Even
I
after all the
totally.
spoilers, it's still worth
Yeah.
watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine most people who want to watch it probably already have. And if you haven't, I'm so sorry that we spoiled it for you, but there was a description in the podcast. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I really enjoyed the show. I mean, again, it has flaws, yes, and I can understand if people don't like it for following Tolkien's work exactly. I can get that as well, but also at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, I think we shouldn't necessarily be drawn into the fact that, okay, if it doesn't follow it exactly, it's not good, because I think it actually can improve. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
very cool. Well, okay, well, if there's nothing else for tonight, we'll definitely go ahead and wrap up here. We're not going to get another season, I think, for a few more years. I think probably as early as 2024, I think.
Oh, it's so far away.
But yeah, so we'll definitely find another show between now and then. I did hear that Loki season 2 did wrap up filming, so I guess next summer we'll get that one. But we'll try and get together before that summer.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay,
We have fun doing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kimmy and Nathan, for joining me tonight. I hope you guys have a really happy Halloween with the little one and have lots of fun this week.
Thank
Same to
you.
you
You
guys.
too. Have a good Halloween.
Okay, thanks. Okay, you've been listening to the Casting for Fun podcast. Thanks, everybody.